your professor for the class. I always found that in my time in the different degrees I pursued, the first class where you can really get a discussion going on the syllabus and learn a little more on expectations was very valuable. And it's something that is kind of lacking in the online learning. So I thought I would make this recording and go through some of the stuff on the syllabus and some of the assignments so that we can kind of level set and you know what to expect throughout the course. Also to open up any sort of questions in the event that you understood something differently than how I explained it. So let's go ahead and get started. The course, we've already got a little ways in. We're at the end of the first week. So I probably should have done this earlier, but I just thought of it today. So apologies for that. I thought we could start with the syllabus. So I'll go ahead and review through here, and then we'll look at each component a little bit by itself. The first couple parts are pretty simple. This operations management book is going to be used heavily in the course, as you can probably tell. It's also your best source when we're going through some of the assignments and discussion board posts. So when you're looking for a good source, it's just as often going to be this operations management book as it is Google. I know a lot of times people have the tendency to do that, and then you don't know what sort of the quality of your sources is sometimes questionable. So instead of having to try to vet that through, sometimes your first line of defense here should be this operations management text. Instructor availability, I'm here all the time. You can, that 24 hours part normally is just a couple hours, as hopefully you've seen. So I respond very quickly. To email, I check it several times a day. A handful of times throughout the semester I'll be unavailable for a day or two, but very rarely that I won't be logging in every day. Going through these grade distributions, the discussion board posts, we have one every week, point value of 50. It should be pretty easy to usually get an A on that, as long as you follow the matrix, and we're going to look at that in a second. The short paper for 60 points is at the end of the class. It's on metrics, measurements that are important to you. Operations management is very important. This final project is a build, so it's essentially one long paper that's broke out into 4 assignments. The first assignment, we'll look at that one individually. You answer 3, 4, 5 pages worth of material for some questions. The same thing on milestone 2, the same thing on milestone 3, all over the same case. It's a Nissan case study. Some of the information is not actually in the case study. It's made up. It's that you just have to think through and present it. So if you're scouring the case study for that threw me off as a professor. So I wanted to call that out. If you're scouring the case study for material and how it relates to the question, sometimes it's not available in the case study. So and then the final submission is the build from the 3 of them with a couple new questions. The grading system, my favorite grade to give is an A, or I guess I don't, grades aren't given, they're earned, but my favorite grade to have earned, award that's earned, is the A. And last class I had a lot of people that did it. A lot of A's and a lot of B's, so it certainly can be done again. I don't anticipate anything but success. On these milestones, I want to point out that I generally allow resubmission. So when you submit them, I'm going to give some very detailed feedback on each one of the submissions. And if your grade was not very well, and you take that feedback and you make the updates, you can resubmit it. And most of the time, I'm okay with awarding additional points then. I also want to, on that same token, because this is building, so you're going to restate a lot of the milestone 1, 2, and 3. You're going to restate it in the final submission. Be sure that you incorporate that feedback for what's missing in the final submission. I did have a lot of people submit, because you're resubmitting the same information again for the final submission. And I had a lot of people resubmit without making the adjustments. Like, hey, you missed talking about this in this section. And then when they resubmitted, they still hadn't updated it. So they lost the points the first time, and then they lost them the second time. So don't do that. It's really easy, because I'll call out a lot of them very specifically, where I'll say add this sentence here, some of the feedback can't be that specific, but there's times that it will be. So just make sure to take advantage of that when you can. The rest of the syllabus is very standard language, talking about the schedule, so that you guys are aware of it. If you just click on each module, it'll show you out the schedule. I think you can only go a couple of modules in advance though, so if you're curious on how it works, that works. Late assignment policies. If you're going to be late on something, let me know in advance, and if there's a good reason, I'm going to be okay with it. Most of the class, we have lives outside of class, especially with this online forum. We're doing it for the convenience, spouses, kids, health, etc. So if you need a little slack there, let me know in advance. The thing that I can't do is retroactively. If you turn in a paper 2 weeks late and I don't hear from you in advance, I'm going to apply some of that late policy. And it's the same late policy that this school uses for all classes. And this is, I'm sure, not your first class with us, because there's a prereq, so I'm sure it's not your first. Any sort of barriers that are considered disabilities, make sure to forward that to me. Academic honesty. There's a big difference on plagiarism between a mistake and willful negligence. So if you cite something incorrectly, some people would consider that plagiarism. I don't. I'm concerned with making sure you're not trying to present someone else's work as your own. So make sure to APA cite all of your stuff. So your in-text citation should be the author, comma, year when you're attributing that source, and then a reference page that follows the APA format. But I say APA-ish because I am not great at APA format, so I'm certainly not good enough at it to know the difference between italicizing a title and not. That's not my concern. It's just making sure that you attribute work to the correct source. All the other policies and stuff are these copyright withdrawal, etc. Those are the same for any other course. So that's the syllabus. We'll go to the next part, the discussion board. Here's what I look for in the discussion boards. You're supposed to have your initial post of 1 to 2 paragraphs done by Thursday night. You get till Saturday in the last week. Use proper citation methods. So this is your first post. Generally, your first post, don't make it terribly short. Paragraph, a reasonably sized paragraph usually takes care of it. I a lot of times see the best responses are those that go ahead and copy and paste the question over into it, so that you can make sure you address each element. Adding sources to that certainly helps. Sometimes if you reach out and find another source or your text and make sure you're attributing that there. The other thing I really like to see in the initial post is application to your career, application to your interest, your personal experiences, etc. That's part of how the discussion board makes everyone grow, is by gathering a little bit from each person. And as you read in your introduction post and this first week's post, there is a wealth of knowledge coming to this class. A lot of people that are going to have a lot of applicable backgrounds. So when you have that and you share that, it really adds to the greater good for everyone. So use your personal examples as much as you can. That'll get you a good first post, which is most of the points, or half the points, I guess. And then the second, you need 2 different responses outside of your own thread. Those responses should be something with a little bit of depth, like it says here, not just I agree or you are wrong. They should be a handful of sentences. The key component I look for is if you actually relate back to what the initial post was. Did you, or was it just a generic reply on the topic? I love to see that same personal reference. So if somebody talks about they experienced this and you had a similar experience, go ahead and add that in. Or if you had a different experience, that's even better, just add that in. I really like probing questions here, because the point is to make sure that we keep this discussion going a little bit. So your probing questions included in there, not just what do you think, have some relevance, some value there. And then when I grade the discussion board feedback, I literally am using this rubric, because it's an embedded rubric. I have one up here just to show. It's an embedded rubric. So I'm going through and I'm first looking, did the initial post, was it good comprehension? These same line items flow through. So I'm literally grading off this. And your timeliness, was the first one by Thursday night, and did you have replies by Sunday night? That's the responses that I'm using. The engagement, this is where I'm gauging your feedback to your peers, where I'm gauging your feedback, where I'm gauging peer feedback. Writing mechanics is not terribly, I'm not huge on it. Just don't look at what you're writing. The occasional mistake I'm not going to make an issue of, but if it's a lot of issues, then it'll be a couple points off here. Keep in mind that's only a small part of the rubric grade. So that's the rubric for the discussion board. How to be graded. Flow through that. So that's what we expect out of the discussion boards. The project 1 submission, we can go ahead and go through that. I find the best way to present these projects is just like, or these milestones is just like the template I threw out there. Copy paste over the questions right here. If you copy paste these over and build your answers under them, you stay really focused on the question because you see it right in front of you. And I get that it's not necessarily the format that you would submit something in the business world, but it really helps you stay focused, and it helps me as far as making sure I know when you broke to the next section. So just copy paste those over. Look at my format on the initial one that I put out there, and you can certainly do subsequent ones by that. I'm not going to do milestone 2 and 3 in that way, where I'm going to put that out, because if you're listening to this and you're following that practice, and you should know how to do it. It's pretty simple. We're just taking these questions and moving them over. So your first milestone, some people have a problem getting it done with in the page limitations. I'm not stuck on 4 pages, but 4 pages for actual material does answer it. If you look at each question and make sure you hit the key points, you're gonna be able to do it within the page restrictions. But if you have trouble being concise and you're a little wordy, or you add in some lengthy examples and you go past, don't worry about that. Just make sure you're not cutting valuable material out to try to hit that 4-page limit, because I'm not a stickler on that. Don't go way over. If it says 4 pages and it's 12 pages, you're probably not answering in the fashion that you should. Milestone 1 questions listed out here. Some of the answers you should be should include some of the obvious. I'll give one example so it'll be really easy there. Everyone should have it. This first question: explain how the company uses operations management functions to provide products and generate value for its customers. One of the operation management functions the value they produce is a vehicle. You obviously need to point to some of the things they do well, like you're going to find some supply chain examples and things of that nature. But the value that they're creating is the vehicle. The competitive advantage: what does Nissan do better than its competition? So you'll want to say, Nissan does such and such, and that gives them a competitive advantage because. So make sure these bolded words, they're bolded for a reason. Compare and contrast the service operation and manufacturing operation. So what does service do and what does manufacturing do? And then how is it the same? And then making sure that they are being applied to Nissan at the company in the case study. So what does Nissan service do? What does Nissan's production do? Make sure to indicate those. Comparing and contrasting PERT over CPM. So you're going to just describe a little bit what they are, and they're very similar. The difference being one is a little more towards estimating and one is a little more towards known experiences. So you'll want to make sure to indicate that. And then what projects at the company would they do? You can say types, or it's easier if you call out like a specific, and when I'm saying a specific project, that's where it goes into. There's not one in the case study, so you would say something like Nissan would use CPM for, and then this is where you're just thinking of a project. So don't try to scour the case study for an example. The case study is a lot more on concept and giving you a company and some background than it is necessarily finding every answer. So the forecasting systems next that we look at, that comes right out of the text. There's a page in the text that you can dang near copy and paste and make sure to properly cite, and that whole section gets done very easy. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the supply chain risk. I was looking at my notes here. I was the one I had. The forecasting system is a 7-step system. That's also out of the text, but you have to apply it to the company. So that's not quite as easy. So anyway, that's your first milestone. Submit that by next Sunday. I'm gonna do. I'll grade early. So if you submit early and maybe had a couple mistakes, you'll get that back in time that you can resubmit it and do it before there's any sort of time issue, so that you still get full points. So try to do that in the near future. Milestone 2 follows that same format as milestone 1. So it's very similar. I'm not going to go through all of them again. I think after milestone 1, milestone 2 becomes a lot easier because you understand what we're looking for. So the same topics. A lot of people struggled with A and B last semester. The cause and effect diagram is your Ishikawa, it's your fishbone. Make sure that the head of the fishbone is a description of what the problem is. Make sure the individual bones are what's the root cause of the problem. So the problem we're looking at is integrating new material. So it would be the head of the fishbone is going to be something like the company struggled to integrate new material through its supply chain. And then each one of these, the bigger bones, is a reason, like a category, if you will, something like production issues and calibration of machines and things of that nature. And then your lowest line items are things like machines are not calibrated the same at each of the manufacturing plants, leading to variances in the outputs, something of that nature. But it's actually a diagram out. You want to diagram it out. I had people use very sophisticated software and give over-the-top stuff and get full points. I also had people that drew it out with a pencil and paper and took a picture and inserted the picture in. I'm not concerned about which one of those you want to pick, because I had those people that drew it out on paper all got full points as well. Process map, look at page 280 in your text. And that's the source here, the reference. You'll want to make it match page 280. This is a simple weighted calculation. You're going to do it for Mexico, you're going to do it for Colombia, and you're going to have a total. And the one that's the total is the best. And then just a short description of the math. Milestone 3 follows the same format, so you're just answering those questions. This first one is going to be one of your longer answers because you have to describe the 3 theories: just in time, TPS, and lean. There's a couple of very key things that I'll look for with each one, and you'll see it in my feedback if you miss it, because I'm really just going to look if you mentioned a couple key things. The triple bottom line is kind of a neat accounting / social way of looking at how a company can track how they're doing. ISO 14000. If you haven't heard of ISO, it covers a lot of things, but what we're really going to be looking for in this ISO section is whether they follow standards of this organization that are environmental and supply quality. So you're going to look at whether they're following different practices as part of this ISO. I would suggest using an outside source to research what that is if you have some confusion. And then Nissan specifically has a lot of material out there as an outside source on what they do for ISO. So this is one where I do kind of deviate a little bit. This question here, if you pull up the old google.com, you'll be able to find all sorts of information specifically on Nissan and ISO standards. And corporate responsibility is what the company can do to boost their social impact, if you will, their footprint with carbon, how good are they at taking care of their employees, those types of things. A lot of people missed this part of the question and they just describe corporate responsibility. But the thing that we're looking for is after you describe it, and here this is part of corporate responsibility, this is part of corporate responsibility, then you're supposed to indicate which piece is the most effective. What can Nissan best do? Or this one doesn't even necessarily have to be Nissan, but what do you believe is the most effective? So you're looking, effective may be better to say important there. You know, what is in your eyes the biggest part of this corporate responsibility and why? And then support your opinion. So it would be, I think the most important aspect of a company having corporate responsibility is treating their employees fairly, and here is why, and have some sort of background for it. Final project. These questions, hopefully they look familiar because they are all, with the exception of just a couple, they are all just a repetition of the last three. You get a few new ones like this inventory management process, the ABC classification. Your text has a great example on how to do that, but most of the questions are the same. So you're just going to copy paste from your prior milestones that question and your answer, and just order it as ordered in the project guideline here. The feedback from me should be incorporated so you can make sure to get full points on it the second time. Final project is due week 7 on Sunday. I think it's pretty simple. We might discuss a little bit more when we get closer. Short paper is due at the end of week 8. It's just a couple pages on what you think the most important metrics are for operations manager. So the thing that a lot of people miss on this last semester is that it's a metric, so it's a measurement. It's not a business practice. That I got a lot of people that were saying stuff like the most important metric is customer service. Customer service isn't a metric. You can measure aspects of customer service. So if you're in a call center, they're going to have some pretty common ones like speed to answer, meaning how long were people on hold, and how many times a call has to be transferred, transfers for resolution, or things of that nature, first call resolution percent. Just keep in mind what you're describing should be a measurement. So maybe for production, it's defects per 1,000 if you go and look at some of the Six Sigma ideas. So just make sure what you write about are measurable things. And then this paper is only a couple pages long, and you just need a couple outside sources. You can use your text as one of those sources. It's not terribly difficult, and I would suggest trying to do it early because, like with the other assignments, if you're completing it early, I can get the feedback to you in time that you can resubmit if you were way off, and you can resubmit before the due date so that you don't lose any points on time. So that's the short paper. Those rubrics that I went through constitute the full class. That's all there is to it. I hope this video was helpful. I think it should be. If not, no big deal. I apologize for taking up your time. I hope you find some value here. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me via email. Is always the best. If you have questions that you think other people would benefit from learning or hearing, this discussion board general questions, we've already done a handful of them, but I respond to that very regularly. So I look for that very closely. So be sure to post something that you think others may be confused on here. And if you need to talk through an assignment, and most Sundays I spend working on the assignments that you're turning in. I'm spending grading real time. So if you're working on that on Sunday afternoon, you can email me, and a lot of times I'll be able to take a phone call right while you're working on it and tell you what you're looking for. So I just ask that you get a hold of me in advance so we can have just a minor scheduling. But then you're certainly free to call me, and my number is 402-630-6080. 402-630-6080. And I usually dedicate a couple hours a day throughout the course, throughout the week, and then on Sundays, just like a lot of students, is when I do most of the work. So I'm available at that time. Just please do try to email me in advance so I can expect it and have an answer ready for you so we can be concise and take care of what you're looking for. That's the course. I'm starting to get rambling, so I'll go ahead and close it out with that. I look forward to another great semester of QSO 300. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you get a lot out of this course. Thank you.